what are the myths and misconceptions of LGBTQ plus?
I have notes.
Manasvini?
I have notes for this one. So I think the community is quite surrounded by harmful stereotypes, not just by people who are cisgendered or heterosexual, but also within the community as well. And two things that I often see, where people from the LGBTQ community stereotype others in the same community is when they're really uh, prejudiced against bisexuals or pansexuals because they don't neatly fit into a box. And I find that ironic because the whole point of having a community like this is so that you don't have to be in a box and you don't have to stick by a certain label or only go for certain people. And I think that sort of fluidity or that openness is something that's not taken very well. People are like, oh, no, you have to either like one or the other, and that's very restrictive, I feel. And another one that I see, maybe not within the community but outside, is that it's not all about sex. Like romantic attraction is different from sexual attraction, and sometimes those things align. You may be a bisexual woman who is attracted to one or more gender, and also sexually attracted to the same. That may align, but sometimes you may not. That may not align. You might be asexual, but you may still want romantic relationships, and you may have a preference with who you want a romantic relationship. And I guess lastly, I'd like to say that I mean it's not deviance from the norm. I know that this is generally the definition, and it comes from us often being told that cisgender and heterosexual is the default, but there shouldn't be a default.
That was really well answered, Manasvini.
Thank you.
And especially the last point, I like where you're talking about how we tend to assume what should be the norm and that people are different from the norm, but everything should be accepted as like possibilities and normal, equally likely, just equally respected, mainly.
And another thing that I've noticed coming up recently is that, oh, this new generation, everyone is coming out as gay or bi. But you don't know if there are actually more people who identify with these terms, or if people are just more comfortable coming out now because it's slightly more accepting than it used to be. So that's another. It's not like more people are turning queer. It's that people are okay with.
That is a very good point, and I do want to add that you don't really like get to choose your sexuality. It's sort of like who you are, and so like that is one of the reasons why coming out is sort of like a big thing, because it's not that they're trying to sort of like tell you this is what I want to be. It's not like an aspiration, but rather it's just like telling a bit about like who they are. It's like like I'm right-handed, that sort of thing. And I also know even people like, even if you're right-handed, you can like switch to left hand, like that sort of thing. Where like, whereas with this you can't do that. And one thing I found on like on the internet, which is like sort of some people think of it as a mental illness, because it's like sort of like just like on your head or something, and like that's not true either. It's not a mental illness. It's just like people being people. And then like I do want to add one more thing, which is like sort of like homosexuality is like not just like some things that just humans do, like animals do it too. Like it's like uniform like everywhere, and it's important that we don't minimize them. And that's why like Manasi's point is very, very important, that we don't think as uh, cisgendered things, or like like being straight as like the default, and everything else is like not the norm, because in their life that is like the normal thing. Do you guys have anything else to add? Ilakkiya?
So a few other misconceptions that I've heard is like trans people, that they're just confused. They maybe at least something that I've heard before is like men are not heard, seen. There's gender disparity in the way that men and women are treated. And so because of that, if people transition from female to male, they'll say, oh, it's because you want something from that community. It's not like your personal identity. And that people are confused, but that is very much not true. It is it's like a really big struggle for the trans community to, I guess, come out and transition, because there's so much stigma and stereotypes and a lot of there's not much acceptance, I would say, from family and friends, speaking from the friends that I know who are trans. So it's, no one would willingly lie about something that would cause, like, it causes a lot of mental stress and anguish to work through and come out about. So trans people are not confused. That's a big myth that I'm aware of. And I was also looking up some more ones, and something I found on the internet was that apparently there's a myth that same-sex parents would be harmful to a child's upbringing since they won't model typical gender roles within a family and the parents, but that is not true. Plenty of societal expectations and statements about what typical gender roles or sex roles in the family are, so they don't necessarily need parents to be the only models of that. So false advertising there.
You do bring up a very good point, Sia.
One of the other misconceptions I've heard is that there is a supposed, it's kind of a slippery slope where people will say, oh, if this is legalized, then what's next? And I find that argument to be extremely flawed, in the sense that it resembles a very erroneous logic about, oh, if we do this, then the immediate next step is going to be that. And then they don't think about, all of these other mechanisms we have in place to not let the world move in a direction that is harmful to people's ability to give consent, or, human rights in general. So I find that misconception to be a little bit harmful. It also comes up with correlations to violence or correlations to deviant behavior, as Manasvini has mentioned, and that has been debunked so many times. And we'll put some links in the YouTube description for you as well, just to see, some figures and some statistics that'll help combat that misconception. The last one that I hear the most from people around me who are still, learning about my identity or hear about it for the first time is, oh, you should, okay, then just keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself, don't celebrate it. This is not something worth celebrating. It's not something worth you going out to marches about or you telling everyone in your life about. And then I think about how many images of heterosexuality that we see growing up that are so normalized. Like if you're growing up and people will say, oh, I can't, who are you going to marry? Do you have a boyfriend? When you're not even, you aren't even in 10th grade and, your family members will do that to you. Or all the movies have, sexualized representation of, straight couples. So I think that's a very flawed idea of what the community is, and the community deserves to, after years and years of not being able to identify with who they are and stifle a part of their being just so they can be safe, just so they won't die, just so that they won't be ostracized. I think it is allowed and very justifiable for this identity to be something that people are very openly proud of and are finding support through, celebrating it and being actively involved in the community.
You bring up a very important point. Representation is very important, because when you grow up, you want to see people who are like you, and when you don't have that opportunity, it is very hard, and that's like one of the things that that makes them like, oh wait, maybe I should hide this part of myself, and that's why it's very important to have the representation. Vyaas, do you have a point to add?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. So great points mentioned by everyone, and so the idea of people who are in the LGBT community who identify as LGBTQ. So the idea that they are possessed by some devil or an evil spirit, and it's something it's something that can be cured is a big misconception, in the sense that like you can't drive it out, like like many people who have like you guys have said on this call. So you can't drive that out, because it's just like you're born with it, and you can't change it in any way. And so that's a big thing that people face. And so the second thing is the idea that the point that Akshay mentioned, where he said it's viewed as a mental illness. So when we look at these topics, it's important to understand, we look towards what's the evidence behind, calling this an illness or not. So till about 1978, so the DSM-5, so which categorizes and defines mental illnesses and disorders. So, LGBT people, part of who identified as gay and lesbian in those times. So that was considered as a mental illness till 1978. So it took them about 40, 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 years to understand that this is not an illness. So this is something that we need to help people. So people ostracizing them or being prejudiced against them brings about mental illness. So they confused the idea of them identifying as LGBT, and so the mental harm they created resulted in other mental illnesses. So that's what we need to address, and not putting this in a box. So they changed that in 1978. So it's very recent, like it's just about one generation. So it's important to not blindly believe all the evidence. So it's good to talk to people and understand, because scientists may be wrong too, or psychologists may be wrong too. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It is an important point, because it coming out, sorry, it coming out as like not being a mental illness, like that allowed people to have the ability to, okay, I can now come out now, and because that's who I am, and not because I have a flaw and I want to share that with you. And that's very important.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to see more videos on the topic, make sure to check out our playlist where we answer more questions. We'll see you next time.